Okay, I'm going to take you through my process of disassembling a 6139 Seiko chronograph. This one is a 6139 706 series, 6069. This is a 69, which means it's a US spec. I've rebuilt this watch before, but I'm going to go through the process of doing it again here on camera. First thing is to remove the case back. There we go. And this one I don't think has any servicing marks in the case. And you can see this watch has had a little bit of water in it at some point. You can see here on the rotor, and some of the sealing surfaces aren't perfect. But that's okay. It's still a functional watch. You can see it's actually got some power in the mainspring. These Seiko watches, they have a couple different components that provide the ability to do the chronograph on top of the standard 6000 series main plate, and I'm going to show you that now. You can see that this watch has some thickness to it. It's a fairly large movement. Alright, so let's get started. So I'm going to start by taking the weight off. And this particular model has the Seiko time cork on the wheel. Wait. And now we have to be a little bit careful with this particular bridge. These screws have their own size that's different from all the other screws, so it's important to keep track of those. Oop, and there we go. We just had our magic fingers jump. Be careful of if there's power in the mainspring. There's our spacing plate. Careful with that. And you can see I'm actually using the case itself as a movement holder, which works out pretty well, keeping these movements in place. Okay, so now this is part of the chronograph spring bridge. This bridge here holds the top components of the chronograph. You can see there's a jewel here for the fourth wheel, which is also the chronograph wheel. There's a spring here that holds the hammer in place. I'll go ahead and take the power off of that one. Just like so. And here are the day-minute counter wheel and other wheels. I'm going to go ahead and remove the case, or remove the movement from the case now. Do that by first pushing in these chronograph buttons. Then you can remove the retaining ring. And then there's a fairly deep set. I can take these springs and pushers out. And then, again, like I was saying, there's a fairly deep set spring-loaded keeper for this. There's the crown and the stem with its seal. Now I'll get my cushion here, place it on, take it off, set that aside, go ahead and put the stem back in so we can align the hands a little bit better. Okay. It's always a little tricky. You want to be very careful when you remove the hands. I'm going to actually use a piece of plastic instead of this because of the raised indicators on the dial. So you want to be very careful not to scratch your dial. These are not the best, but they do work fairly well for this. And then again, the lower minute counting wheel, which is a very delicate lift here, but that comes right off of the plastic. For other movements and other watches, you can use the little paper removers. I'll just delicately here grab these. These have not been reloomed. They still have a little bit of moisture issue. But there we go. There's the movement. Dial exposed. And then we can take the movement ring here and turn it a little bit so we can see the screws to remove the dial. That's one, there are two. There's number two. And you can see here, you can take a look, get this to focus. This particular watch was made in 1976 and has a month here of, so that's the year, that's the month. So this is 6/76 because that's the decade it was produced in, and 3, which would be March. And if we look at the back of the, look at the back here, this is now 6/4. So usually they're about a month apart, the dial number and the case back number. Okay, so here we go. This is the 6139 calendar side, and I'm going to switch this over now to a movement holder. I have ones that are produced for these watches that do a pretty good job, and so let's do one here. Okay, now there's a trick to these, and basically the only real important part of calendar side assembly and disassembly is that you're very careful with this little clip. This clip has to be put in with the chamfered side down, so you can get your screwdriver or get your whatever removing tool that you choose. What? Okay, I did. And now I'm going to take a little bit of Rotico and try and lift this off. I can do it pretty easily. So that's the day wheel. And now you can see the underplate here, which is holds the date wheel down. It's pretty easy to take this off. You can see that there's a hole here for the minute recording wheel, or minute recording hand. 4 tapered screws. Hold this in place. Take these out. Carefully set these aside. I usually try and arrange my bench so that I have parts that are associated with that particular side or that particular region of the watch together, so if I need to take pictures of things as I go to remember what the layout is or which screws go with what, because when you put them in the cleaner they all sort of get mixed together, so you can have a sense of what the arrangement should look like. Okay, so now you can remove this plate and the rest of the calendar works. There we go. So that usually doesn't come off together, but there it is. Okay. Date wheel. Now there's a retaining spring here that you can take off, and sometimes they go flying, but that's okay, they don't go too far. Alright, bring over. And then here's your recording hand. And now for the, what I like to call the Millennium Falcon, which is the finger that turns the date and the day. So these components come off together. Okay, now we have some quick set components. Right here, it's attached to the keyless works. There we go. Okay, now this bridge, this the retaining plate here. We have our another gear. It's between the day and the date. Okay. This. There are two different types of screws here. There's a machine style screw and then a tapered screw. Make sure you keep those in order. Take that off. There's two different intermediate wheels here. You can see this one has a little ring. That's for lubrication, so you have to put that with the that side up. They work the same whether you're upside down or not, but if you're a Seiko servicer, then you should certainly try and keep that in place. Take off the cannon pinion. There that goes. Sometimes you need to tighten those up. I know on the Zodiac movements they have a very unique offset cannon pinion system, which makes it a little challenging. Alright, so let's take off the keyless works. Really just totally strip down the calendar side here. Okay, and there we go. So this little spring here comes off. Alright, we can then take out the crown and stem. Alright, so that's now calendar side basically fully stripped down. I usually don't remove this this sort of hoop spring here. We can also take out the jewel and the spring for the, this is the die shock setting. Basically you just got to go around in a circle until it comes out. A slightly sharper set of tweezers here to get this really small stuff. That should come right out. This is a particular type of cap jewel that's for your balance wheel. Okay, so that's calendar side. Now let's go back over to train side. Now I'm going to put it in my normal holder here. Make it a little easier. Okay, so here we go. Usually I have to try and get a good grip. You do sometimes have to put a little bit of force on these screws to make sure that your screwdriver doesn't slip. So you want to make sure you've got a good hold on the movement with your movement holder. That wasn't so great, so let's shift that a little bit. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now, move some tools out of the way. Now we've got this bridge that has to come off, and so that's 3 screws. And for basically most of these, except for the pallet fork bridge, these screws are essentially interchangeable, although you want to make sure that you use the right screws in the right places whenever you're doing service. And what this is going to expose are the components that are used to change the minute recording, and also will show us the top side of the top side of the chronograph wheel here. So there are two springs. There's this one and this one. This one is for the reset to move the hammer, and this one is a slightly stronger spring, which is to change the position of these arms that I'll show you in a moment that disengage the chronograph assembly. So now that we have the calendar side taken apart, we can go ahead and take off this intermediate wheel and this minute recording wheel, and you can see this one has this thing underneath that allows it to be reset. So that's where the hammer locks on. Be careful with that one. Okay, so now what I like to do is take these springs off, and there's an easy way to do it. You can just lift it there. You can either put a piece of Rotico or your finger. That spring comes off. Then this one here, which is a slightly more delicate spring, you can just pop it off. And actually this on the C movements is an addition where they don't have those on the earlier movements, so you can tell the difference between these springs. And then this just comes right off around this post. Okay, should pop right off. Bringing the hammer, this is the reset mechanism for the chronograph, along with it. And now we can see these are the fingers that operate the chronograph wheel. And here's the pusher, for example, that's engaged. And if we pop that back, we can disengage it if we can get it in the right spot. There we go, locked on again. Oop. Stop that. Get it locked on again. Yep. It's not as easy as it looks. See if I can hold this in place and give it a little push. Now what that allows is I can open up these. And there are two screws involved in these fingers. I'm calling them the wrong name, but that's okay. And that one, this one is shouldered here. This one has a shoulder on the top, so you can see that it's slightly different than the other screws. This one's just a machine screw with a large head. And now we can take off these fingers. I like to try and just slowly work them off. There's one. This one just should pop right off. There's the other. Okay. Got to be careful with your chronograph wheel. It's a bit fragile, but usually get these off no problem. Right there, went right back onto where it came from. Come on. Now. There we go. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go ahead and take off the balance. First I'm going to remove the top jewel, cap jewel. So again, you just spin this. It should come right off. This is the die shock setting. Put that aside. Take off my jewel. Now to control my screwdriver, I'm going to hold it with my piece here, and then this one. Okay, so again, these screws are similar, the same actually, than the ones that are part of the other components on the chronograph bridge. So it's okay to just give this a little bit of motion, and there we go. There's our balance with our hairspring. You can see this is on its own. This is different than the other 6000 series, where it's got, these are on what's called a cock, which is a 1-screw bridge, and this is on an actual bridge which has 2 screws, which is more secure. Set that aside. And usually what I do when I clean these is I'll put the chronograph or I'm sorry, I'll put the put this bridge back on with the hairspring and the balance, so that way it's slightly protected when it goes into the cleaner, and screw it back down. So when I take it out, I'll take the chronograph or the balance bridge back off and let that dry on its own. Okay. So now what we can do is we can take off this screw here. That's for this castle, which operates the chronograph mechanism, and I'd like to put my screwdriver just in here and release the tension on this spring, and there's two components. There's this. Dylan, I'm busy. And this. I'm busy. Not right now. Okay, now what you can see is that you got to be very careful not to lose that little washer. So now there's another piece we have to remove, and that's this, which has a bushing that holds the intermediate wheel for the the minute counter. But it's actually its own little component that we have to take off. It's got a machine screw, cap screw that holds it in place. And that will reveal a jewel that needs to be lubricated for both the, oops, come on out of there. There it is. Okay, so there's its screw, and there's this little bushing holder. So it has a hole that you can lubricate through for the third wheel, but there's a jewel here for the escape wheel that needs to be lubricated, so that should come off before it goes in, and that way you remember to lubricate that jewel right there and that bushing right there. Okay. Now what we can do is we can take the ratchet wheel off. It's got its own size screw. It goes into the top of the arbor. Take that off. And here we go. So this is under power right now, which is a little bit of power, but not a whole lot. So I'm just going to take that off. Hope it doesn't go flying. There it goes. Okay. All right, so now we can take this top bridge off. So this is the main bridge plate for the train. There are three, again, same size screws as the upper plate. And the bridge for the balance. Go ahead and take those out. One, two. This one's a little bit of a challenge to get out on its own, so I just actually leave it in. Usually take it off together with the bridge and then dump it out. Okay, so then we can remove this bridge. Just grab it here, usually, or here, and it come off. It's very persnickety today. There we go. Get the third screw out, right there. Now what you can see is the train wheels. So, first thing I'm going to remove is the chronograph wheel. Very careful with that. Oops. Try and be very careful with that. And just check it, make sure it, yep, works pretty well. So that's the heart of this movement, is that wheel. It is one that you got to be very careful with. There's the third wheel. Go ahead and take off the bridge for the pallet fork. Sorry for the yelling. Alright, here we go. And then pallet bridge. There's the pallet fork. And take a look at these. Looks pretty good. I'm going to get a loop on here. See if I can get a little closer to this one. Yeah, they look pretty good. Sorry. Must be dinner time. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a moment. I'll come back. Okay. Making a little more space here on my work mat so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to remove the wheel. So that's the, check out the, yeah, it looks pretty good. It's a little dirty. Make sure there's no hair or anything on any of these wheels. It's one thing you have to be very careful about, especially when you're in your basement, and that is that all the dust and debris from your house and your shirts and all the things while you're working can end up on these very, very delicate parts. And then you got to really make sure that you're reassembling, that you take care and take time to remove anything that shouldn't be on there. Usually the cleaning process removes a lot of it, but if it sits on your bench for even a few minutes, a lot of times a small hair can accumulate here or there, and that makes a big difference to both the quality of the work and quality of the running of the movement. So this escape wheel is a bit of a mess at the moment. I'm not sure why, but I have it clean now. Put that over here with the other wheels. Okay, so now we have this cock here. You can see this screw has a very different kind of finish. It's more of a brushed finish, which goes along with the cock. So the reason that these don't have a hack is because you need a groove here for the style of hacking lever that goes with this 6000 series. And right here is the hole for the minute counter, and they interfere. So it's not like a 6309 where you have a hack, or a 6106, 6119. Has the same basic shape of this, but there's no groove for a hack. And you can see there's a jewel on this. It sits here for the fourth wheel. I'm sorry, for the this base wheel here. Okay, so here's the spring, main spring arbor, and that's where your cannon pinion goes on the calendar side. This fits through here, and then your cannon pinion sits on that with a sort of a friction fit or a compression style fit. Okay. Alright, so that's the train totally broken down, and you can leave the click spring on if you want to. Generally I take it off. It just makes it a little bit easier to pull things on and off, but it's not an easy screw to take in and out. You have to be a little bit careful. Okay, so there you go. There's the main plate in all of its glory. You can see here you've got a jewel here, and a jewel here, and a jewel here. So the main plate is fully jeweled, except for this, which is the Achilles heel of this particular style of movement. In the Grand Seikos, they put a jewel in the lower mainspring arbor hole. You can buy these lower arbor jewels. There are a couple Seiko specific ones that have a lower and upper. So the upper mainspring jewel would go, for example, here. So you can see these sit on top of each other like this. This is the train bridge, and that metal bushing right there can get worn out. It's usually not as bad as the lower because that's a metal piece, but here you've got a hardened piece right here that fits down into the brass, which is a really soft metal by comparison, and you end up getting this into an oblong shape. And then you have to put it into a particular machining device and put a new jewel in here. So I'm not going to go through that process with this particular movement because this one isn't so bad, and I need the jewels that I have right now in stock to do a project for a customer. So that one I will leave. Alright, so the reassembly is pretty straightforward. It's just the repeat backward steps. It's always a good idea to make sure that you clean all of these jewels through the movement, and that can either be done, in this case I've already cleaned all the components in the sonication bath to remove all the years and years of crud and moisture residue. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a clean piece of Rotoco and I'm going to go through all the jewels and make sure that I get most of the oil that I put in to lubricate off, so that when I reassemble things I'm putting fresh oil on fresh jewels. And I generally do my lubrication with a loop so I can make sure that I'm putting the right amount of lubrication on each particular jewel. And that way I'm not over lubricating, which would spread lubrication throughout the watch eventually and lead to hairspring issues and things like that. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I'll come back and we'll do the reassembly and in another video.